Reflection on democracy. Democracy is a political system based on the method of collective decision-making, with equal influence of the participants on the outcome of the process or on its essential stages. Although this method is applicable to any social institution, today its most important application is the state. Is democracy applicable to any social institution? The family, in which parents and children have parental authority and the responsibility of children to submit to the authority of the parents. Army orders are given by those who are higher in rank and lower ones must unconditionally fulfill them. Production is bosses and workers are all controlled by a hierarchy. The business hierarchy is distributed according to the principle of who invested the most money or their equivalent. An example of a meeting of shareholders. A group of friends, scientists, craftsmen rarely resort to democratic procedures. Usually there are leaders in the company. As a rule, their opinion is taken into account. It is very hard for me to remember where democracy works except in the elections to state bodies. There is a normative theory of democracy. The ethical side of democracy is important for her. When and why democracy is desirable from the point of view of morality, what principles should be the foundation of democratic institutions? What are the reasonable expectations of citizens in a democratic society? According to the conclusions of the theory, democracy is not just people's rule, but also a system of citizens' rights. The violation of these rights casts doubt on the democratic nature of government. I remind you of what rights and freedoms we are talking about. Deal with others as you want to be treated with you, the golden rule of morality. This rule is rigidly connected with the rights and freedoms given to us from birth. The right to interact, association, cooperation. The right to dispose of property, health, time. Freedom of speech and belief are inviolable. Violence is a punishment for my freedoms and actions with my rights without my consent. Violence against rights and freedoms is a crime. Righteous violence against the offender is required. That is, if democracy leads to the violation of human rights and freedoms, it becomes criminal and therefore not legitimate. In The Social Contract, 1762, Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that democracy is incompatible with representative institutions, because the supreme power of the people is inalienable and non-delegated. Since direct democracy is only possible in small communities, Rousseau concluded that legitimate democracy is unrealizable on the scale of the nation-state. He also believed that democracy leads to acute internal conflicts and civil wars. In his work Democracy in America, 1835-1840, Alexis de Tocqueville took a position somewhat opposite to Rousseau. He concluded that freedom of political organization was necessary to defend against the dictatorship of the majority. At the same time, in his opinion, civil organizations contribute to the development of a civilized society. John Stuart Mill developed a utilitarian approach to justifying the value of individual rights and freedoms. In this approach, the criterion is the achievement of maximum well-being for the maximum number of people. In his essay on freedom, 1859, Mill argued that the only ground for limiting personal freedom is to protect others from specific harm applied by the individual. He considered illegitimate paternalism, which allows restricting the freedom of people for their own good. He also argued that in order to search for truth, society needs open discussion and a clash of polar points of view. Thomas Hobbes argued that government in a democracy is worse than in a monarchy, since democracy stimulates the implementation of irresponsible politics, promoting the narrow interests of some at the expense of others, or even pushing different segments of society against each other. Plato believed that democracy tends to underestimate the importance of knowledge and experience for good governance. Some modern neoliberal philosophers criticize democracy for economic inefficiency and believe that the market should exercise control over society. An important problem in the theory of democracy is the question of how to avoid the dictatorship of the majority. even if the decision is equally responsive to general preferences that reflect the views of informed people. Such a decision may have consequences that are unacceptable from a moral or legal point of view for a part of the population. Property rights are of particular concern, as the relatively less affluent majority are tempted to encroachments on the property of a wealthier minority. According to Thomas Cristiano, permanent minorities are victims of inequality among the participants in the democratic process, which deprives the authorities of the moral right to make decisions affecting the interests of this minority. All of the above shows that democratic solutions should exist only within the framework of moral principles, do to others in this way what you want to do with you, the golden rule of morality, and in compliance with the rights and freedoms given to us from birth. Join a group of noble, moral people. Links in the description. Introduce your friends with this information. See you next time.